What's going on, everybody? Tyler with Ellerbrock Norris and the Encore Safety Network. Wanted to bring a topic to everybody's attention that I've been learning a lot about, and I think it's super valuable for our members to know and understand. I've got the crew from Herzig Engineering on with me today, and we're going to be talking through electrical safety. So Caitlyn here is a certified electrical engineer. Caitlyn, I'll kind of let you introduce yourself and kind of some of the things that you see in your designations, and kind of we'll get into it.
Okay, yeah, my name is Caitlyn Heztel, and like Tyler said, I'm with Herzig Engineering. I have my electrical engineering degree and the Certified Electrical Safety Compliance Professional certification through NFPA, and that's an internationally recognized certification that basically just means I know the NFPA 70E, which is the standard for electrical safety in the workplace. I've been doing this for several years. I've gotten a lot of experience auditing different companies and work sites and facilities, and done a lot of work training employees and supervisors and management, and even all the way up to corporate level, on the importance of electrical safety and how to keep people safe, which is why I am now the training programs manager at Herzig.
Well, awesome. I'm really excited for this conversation. As I just said, this is a new area that I haven't really dove into before.
Sure.
I think our members are going to find a ton of value. And so kind of where we're going to focus the conversation today is around electrical safety for contractors, and two things that OSHA could find you for. So maybe give us an idea on kind of what those things are, and some areas that our members could be focusing on.
Sure. So whenever it comes to contractors or construction site safety, OSHA does consider electrical hazards prevalent. In fact, in 1926, Subpart K is all about the electrical standards for construction sites and contract work. And so it is an important topic. Unfortunately, a lot of people just think about electrical safety once a facility is built. It's in place, people are working in it, and we have to address these hazards. But there's still that process of electrical safety needing to be considered throughout the construction and contracting phases. So with that, there's several different hazards, and it's the same kind of across the board. So we've got electrical shocks, which, they could be somewhat minor, and a lot of those go unreported. So there's a lot more shocks happening every single day that we just don't know about. Or the more severe shocks that end up with somebody getting medical attention, even up to electrocution, which means that they actually had been killed by that electric shock. But then there's also electrical fires and electrical explosions, which we would often attribute to arc flash or arc blast scenarios. And again, these aren't terms that people are really talking about in the construction industry, because it's not as focused on, unfortunately. We hear those crazy stories where workers are getting electrocuted on the job site, but these other hazards happen as well. So whenever we talk about electrical safety, we are talking about all the different electrical hazards, because if you've got electricity, you've got the hazards.
Yeah, and I know one area that you are super educated on is what kind of comes into play with when OSHA comes knocking, or what are companies and contractors, what should they be focused on when it comes to OSHA and electrical safety?
Yeah, so really the main way to protect people from from electrical incidents would be proper training and awareness, which OSHA does really emphasize in their regulations. And they lean highly on the NFPA 70E for more specifics on the type of training for that. So in 110.6 specifically of the NFPA 70E, it talks about the training requirements for understanding what those hazards are, how severe they would be if they hurt you, and how often that training is. And beyond that, there also needs to be a written electrical safety program. And the reason for that is, even if this contractor doesn't necessarily do electrical work, they're not an electrical contractor, everyone on the job site is going to be exposed potentially to the electrical hazards, and therefore need to know how to recognize and avoid and or mitigate those hazards on the job. That's part of your pre-job planning. And in fact, 1926 416 in that subpart K that I mentioned talks about needing to be able to protect employees from these electrical hazards regardless of their job duties. So pre-job planning is essential for that, and that kind of documentation happens in your electrical safety program and then you just train on it and work with it from there.
Yeah, and that's important for everybody to know, because like you mentioned, whether you're an electrical contractor or not, you're always going to be around it. And as we'll learn today, and some of the things you've already mentioned, there's a lot of risk that comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess maybe what exactly do you mean when you say electrical safety?
Yeah, so basically I just mean being able to recognize that hazard, whether it be a shock potential or an arc flash potential or maybe even electrical fire. Like, what does that look like? What kind of situations would cause that? It could be as simple as using a faulty tool. A lot of things happen because of that. Or there's overhead power lines and people are, getting too far up and elevated and not realizing that they're close enough that electricity can actually arc over, or they physically become in contact with those overhead power lines or underground lines or anything like that. Even electrical installations like temporary power, for example. A lot of people use temporary power for lighting and to be able to plug in their tools and get the job done, and that's causing a lot of these incidents as well, because they're either not done properly or people are maybe not using it the way that it was supposed to, and it's leading to these shock and arc flash events on the job site for non-electrical workers.
Yeah, and I know that you just mentioned a handful of them, but in your experience, what have been some of the more common electrical hazards on construction sites?
Definitely overhead power lines. If you have them in the area, unfortunately, there's still a large number of the incidents happening because people are, driving a crane into it or a bucket truck or whatever, or just getting too close in general. Scaffolding is another big problem with that for painters and whatnot. So I mean, anybody who's around electrical power lines need to be aware that there's a certain distance you have to stay away from them, especially because they're higher voltages. They do have that electrical arc over potential, which not a lot of people really talk about, unfortunately. You get close enough, you don't have to physically touch it for it to come out and jump and bite you. So that's one big thing. And then the other one is, like I mentioned, having either faulty tools or temporary power installations not be installed properly. And therefore, maybe there's a grounding issue and they turn on their tools and suddenly it's shocking them. Or extension cords being used that really shouldn't because they're in terrible condition. And then someone goes to pick it up or unplug it and move it to wherever they need, and just the act of grabbing it causes them to get shocked. Anything really comes to mind with that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, I'll admit a little guilty of having an extension cord that probably needs to be replaced.
Fair.
I've had it for way too long. But when you think through a construction site,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you think through some of the electrical contractors that are out there, but who's really at risk when it comes to being around this type of hazard?
Sure. Yeah, and I think a lot of people leave it to the electrical contractors to figure out the electrical safety stuff too, because they're the ones working with it, right? But studies have shown and statistics prove that 2/3 of electrical fatalities are non-electrical workers. They're the welders, they're the carpenters, they're the masons, they're HVAC crews, they're painters, drywall or ceiling tile installers. Pretty much anybody but electrical are the ones most at risk, mostly because they don't have that training. They don't have that awareness. They're focused on their job, which is not electrical, and don't realize that they're so close to or getting into somewhere that has those hazards, and then it's causing these injuries and fatalities. Because again, if you're not an electrical contractor, they're not bothering with electrical safety as much or as often as they really should.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And for those non-electrical contractors, are they at risk of getting fined by OSHA in a situation where it is maybe on one of their job sites?
Absolutely. Going back to that subpart K for the construction industry, it very clearly says that all workers should be aware, regardless of the trade, they should be aware of these hazards and have them identified ahead of time and know how to avoid and or mitigate them in the moment. In other words, perform some sort of risk assessment. So identify the hazards, assess the risk, and perform some sort of risk control method, typically with supervisors before they start work. And certainly if they come across a hazard, how do they address it? They've done their job site planning, they're halfway through the day, come back after lunch, whatever it may be, and then they come across something that looks hazardous. How do you deal with that? Being able to do that risk assessment is something that every worker on the job site should know. And that's in the OSHA reg, as well as, like I said, they point to the NFPA 70E, and that as well is covered in there pretty extensively.
Yeah, that's good information, and for our members that a lot of them are, non-electrical contractors. Right. What can they be doing to help mitigate these hazards? What's required by them to help educate their employees, like you just mentioned?
Yeah, so first off, I would just make sure that those contract employers have a solid electrical safety program. And I know it sounds kind of strange. You don't have electrical workers, so what would go in that? Well, simply the things that we're talking about here today. Common hazards on the job site, how to address them. And, if you see an electrical worker, for example, doing something unsafe, we all have the authority to stop work and the responsibility, right? And so even that could say, well, this guy saw what was going on and didn't stop it, and now he's dead. Like, what happened here? Why didn't he intervene on something that was clearly such a big mistake? And that has happened as well. It's unfortunate that those situations occur, but really have an electrical safety program. Make sure that anyone who's going to a job site, whether it be an apprentice or the worker themselves or even the supervisor roles, even the safety guy from that, or safety guy or gal, be trained on that electrical safety program and know how to do those risk assessments. Not necessarily going to have to work with the electrical equipment or fix the issue themselves, but at least be able to identify it and know who to contact to get it fixed.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece. It's you can't be an expert on everything, but having those third-party resources and knowing who to call when you do see something. You mentioned, seeing somebody do something unsafe, and having that culture to stop the work and make sure that the workplace is as safe as it can be.
Yeah, nobody wants to be a tattletale, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, if it's between somebody grumbling at you that you got them in trouble versus you saw something, didn't say anything, and they're now in the hospital or worse, I think I'd rather be labeled a tattletale personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And with construction, especially nowadays, everybody's busy.
Oh my gosh,
so much work going on, and everybody's just running on fumes. Within our construction clients and contractor clients that, again, aren't specifically dealing with this day to day, how much and how often should they be training on these topics?
So in that, we get our information from the NFPA 70E, and it says every 3 years. And that's simply to make sure that we're staying up to date with the most relevant codes and standards of the day, because new editions of this electrical safety standard come out every 3 years. And that's at a minimum, or if their job duties change such that they're exposed to additional or other hazards that weren't covered in the training originally. So every 3 years, and since it's not necessarily an electrical worker we're talking about, it doesn't have to be incredibly extensive. You're not going to be teaching people how to use a meter and how to put on the PPE and things like that, which take up quite a bit of time. But again, just being able to recognize and avoid and report and help to mitigate those hazards as best they can certainly goes into that training. And I know every 3 years, that's hopefully doable for everybody. But I would also say make it like a toolbox talk. Bring it up a little more often than every 3 years. It doesn't have to be formal training, except for every 3 years, though.
Yeah, that's exactly where my head just went. Where it's like, this might not be something that you're required to be training on every year or every 6 months, but this with this exposure and this risk, and it is on every job site. It definitely should be something that we're talking with our employees about and our teams about.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, a third of the incidents are electrical workers, and the other 2/3 out of hundreds of fatalities that happen a year are non-electrical workers. So we definitely need to keep this a prevalent topic in our mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when it comes to the written programs that we have built into our safety programs, can they just go out and find something and copy and paste it into their current safety program, or what would your recommendations be on that piece?
So I would highly caution that. There are a lot of good free resources out there, good templates or sample programs, and that's a good starting place. But by no means should that be your only effort to getting an electrical safety program, because they do need to be edited and specific to your organization. There could be different qualifications needed based on what job you're doing and the level of risk you're exposed to based on that job. And so unfortunately, it's not quite as easy as downloading a template online or an example program, slapping your name on it, and calling it good. You do have to make sure it's specific and applicable and useful. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Make it useful for the guys and gals out there that have to follow it. Because if it's not useful, they're not going to care. They're not going to follow it. They're going to read it and go, that doesn't even apply to me, so whatever.
Yeah, and we talk about that within the safety network all the time, that it's more than just having the safety program in place, but it's really truly having that culture of working safely. And I mean, this stuff feeds right into it, that it should be top of mind, and it is a huge risk for anybody on the job site. Mm-hmm. What about like PPE? For somebody that's not specifically an electrical contractor, what requirements are out there for PPE on a construction site?
Well, if you're not doing electrical work and you're not tasked to do that, so like you're not supposed to do that, don't touch it. You don't really need to have electrical PPE, thankfully. You would rely on the electrical contractors to fix any issues you found rather than doing it yourself. So electrical contractors, they need the dielectric, rubber gloves, leather protectors, the footwear, arc-rated suits and shirts and pants, and the face shield, and basically what looks like a bomb suit, the flash suits. But whenever you're not an electrical worker, it's just going to be basic worker safety stuff on a construction site. Hard hat, safety glasses, maybe hearing protection, depending on what you're doing. Definitely still good work boots, typically like composite or steel toe, safety glasses. I don't know if I said that or not. Work gloves, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's good to know. And I want to reiterate one point that you said, that if it is a concern, let's let the specialized people fix it.
Yes, this is not the kind of this is not the kind of situation you want to do it yourself without the proper training and qualifications. In fact, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble by doing that. If nothing else, just if it's not installed right, that's a violation itself. So don't want to be messing with stuff that you're not qualified to do.
Yeah, well, it gets very dangerous.
Right.
Without a doubt. Let's. Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and the other side of it is, if you are trying to fix something real quick because the electrical contractor is going to have to wait until tomorrow or whatever the case may be, well, you don't have the tools and PPE that you need in order to protect yourself from those hazards, so it's just not worth it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where that training comes in, and just making sure that our employees it's known that, hey, if this is an electrical issue, let's let the professionals take care of it. Because the end result is not going to be good. In the event that there is an electrical accident or emergency on your site, how do we prepare our team to respond in the correct manner, quickly, efficiently? What goes into that piece?
So there's a lot of different ways that question could be answered, to be honest, depending on what the incident has happened, what incident has occurred. And I would say that just some general emergency response training specific to electrical incidents is step number 1. So as part of your 3-year training requirement, I would definitely highly and heavily cover that aspect of it, because, again, like you said, if you come across something and somebody else is getting hurt, what do? You can't just be like, oops, I don't have PPE, I can't help you. You don't want to do that, no. So being able to understand how you can get the right people involved. Certainly call 911 if they're like locked onto the circuit, or if there's been an explosion, like an arc flash, because they're going to need medical attention for sure. Some basic first aid for burns, whether it be an electrical burn because of the current passing through their skin, or an arc flash burn. having some basic understanding on what you do in the meantime from the incident to the time EMS get there, emergency medical services. That would be a good point to cover. And then, contact release is another big portion of it. So like I mentioned, someone's locked onto a circuit. That means that there's so much current passing through their muscles that they cannot physically move. They can't get themselves off. In fact, my brother's an electrician, and he, unfortunately, a couple months ago got locked on. He was installing a light fixture at a facility, and he was up on a ladder, and he had two options: either stay locked on or let his legs go limp and fall off the ladder, because there was no one else in the room with him to get him off or turn off the power. So he fell off the ladder. He's okay, thankfully. It wasn't that tall of a ladder, but still, like, nobody should be put in that situation. So knowing safe methods of contact release, being able to identify quickly the types of things that you can use without also getting yourself locked onto the circuit, because you definitely do not want to touch someone who's being shocked, because that could cause you to get shocked as well. Going through all those steps and processes in your training ahead of time would be really the best way to help in the event of an emergency like that.
Wow, that's well, I'm glad to hear your brother's okay. That sounds absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Like you said, just almost you're almost glued to where you're at.
Yep.
And you have so much electricity running through you. That's crazy. That's a wild situation.
Yeah, he and I talked quite a while after that. I was like, what were you thinking?
So then what's, for some of our members that this is something that, they see the value in, and maybe it's something that they're not, keeping up to date with, or, doing the extensive training that they should be or want to be doing. Where can they find resources? How can we loop in your team?
Sure.
What's that kind of, where's good best place to get information from, I guess?
Yeah, so I would say the first stop would probably be our website, herzigengineering.com. We definitely have a lot of training options. If what you're seeing on our website isn't sufficient, though, that's where I step in. We build custom trainings for people all the time, depending on what your employees are exactly doing. And then typically that goes hand in hand with the updating of an electrical safety program, or creation of one from scratch if you don't already have one, because those really do tie together tightly. And if they don't, then it's a broken system for electrical safety.
Wow, yeah. Well, having access to good resources, one thing that we focus on at Ellerbrock for the network members is keeping them out doing their jobs and keeping people safe, and us almost leaning on us to help find the relevant information. So something I'll absolutely do to share with our members is to get you guys' website out there, share your information.
Yeah, absolutely.
With them as well. So for any specific questions, what, I guess on kind of a last note, what's the most important thing to be thinking of when you think of electrical safety? What's the biggest piece of advice that you would give to someone that's not familiar with this topic?
I guess my biggest piece of advice would just be, don't touch it. Don't interact with it or try to work on it if you don't know what you're doing, including at home. Just to be frank, like, we got a lot of DIY projects that go terribly wrong in the home and lead to a shocking number of injuries and fatalities, no pun intended. And it's just, don't touch it. If that's not part of your job duties, don't try to be the hero and fix the thing that's gone wrong in the moment. And for supervisors, I guess just, make sure that you're communicating the importance of electrical safety and hazard avoidance and awareness all the time.
Awesome. Well, Caitlyn, I appreciate your time today. This has been very educational for me. And I know that our members are going to find a lot of value in just this dialogue and some of the resources that we're going to be able to get out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm absolutely open to any conversation, discussion, people bombarding me with questions. That's what I'm here for. So no question too small or insignificant. That's what I'm here for.
Love to hear it. Well, thanks again for your time. And yeah, Safety Network members, if you have any questions, reach out to me, reach out to Caitlyn, and I'll get you guys connected with some different educational topics or whatever it may be when it comes to electrical safety.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Tyler.